So I just saw that Sony recently announced their newest camera, the Sony ZE E10 Mark II, which really begs the question, should you buy the Lumix S9 or the Sony ZE E10 Mark II? Now, quick disclaimer, I haven't gotten the chance to shoot on the E10 Mark II, personally speaking, but I have seen a lot of YouTube videos and a lot of people's thoughts and opinions who've shot on this camera and then also shot on the Lumix S9. And since both of these cameras are very similar in body design and probably who the target market audience is for, I want to give kind of my thoughts between these two cameras. Starting off with the price point between these two cameras. The E10 Mark II from Sony is coming in at around $1,000 for the body alone. Meanwhile, the Lumix S9 is coming for $1,500. But there is some key differences between the S9 and the E10 Mark II, and that is going to be coming down to the physical body. Let's start with the Lumix camera. First off, the S9 is a full frame camera. There's 3 extra buttons around this entire body that are fully customizable, like the LUT, autofocus, and the exposure button on top. On top of the camera also has a dial that actually allows you to switch into multiple different photo or video modes, and then 3 custom dials to set into a couple different customized modes that you can preset your camera in. And then lastly, the only other worth notable thing about this camera is that it does come in multiple different colorways like green, red, blue, and black, though that doesn't really do anything but does give it some style points. Now for the Sony camera, there is going to be some noticeable differences in terms to the body style. First off, it's not a full frame sensor, it is an APS-C sensor, but it does have a dedicated hand grip, though on the S9 there is no dedicated hand grip and you have to buy this part separately if you do want a hand grip. But if you don't want a hand grip, the S9 doesn't have that. Other notable things about the E10 Mark II is there is a hot shoe, so you do have a flash. There's 3 switches for photo, video, and slow and quick. So I assume you can do some more customization within the menu systems itself. And the last thing that I think is super notable for this new Sony camera is there is a microphone on top of the camera that can be directed in multiple different directions. Now for both of these cameras, there is no EVF, there's no mechanical shutter, but they do both have USB-C, a mic jack, and a micro HDMI. Though one thing it is worth noting, on the S9, the micro HDMI and the USB-C connection for power is on the right handle versus the Sony camera has all 4 of those things on the left: the headphone jack, the mic jack, micro USB, the micro HDMI, and the USB-C. There is only one SD card on both of these cameras. On the S9, it is going to be located at the bottom with the battery, and on the Sony camera, it's going to be on the left of the camera. And lastly, it has a standard battery. Basically, what I mean by this is the battery that they're using on the S9 and the battery they're using on the E10 Mark II are basically standard for other Sony or other Lumix cameras. So if you have a S5 IIX or you have a FX30, it's going to be using that same battery between both of those camera systems. Now for the user interface, I actually prefer the Lumix menu system and just the overall layout and design. One thing though that I wish that the S9 got that the Sony E10 Mark II has is this new thing for vertical info display. Basically, when you rotate your camera and the gyroscope tells that it's rotated, the info, instead of being sideways, it's going to flip vertically and you're able to view all your information on the screen. But then moving on to video specs is where some of the big differences between these cameras will lie. So on the S9, we are going to be getting 6K open gate, 4K 24 and 30 frames a second, all in full frame. They also have a 3.3K open gate, which is an MP4 Lite, so basically a smaller format of open gate which you can transfer to your phone via the Lumix Lab app. And then lastly, 4K 48 and 60 frames a second in an APS-C crop mode, and then 1080 120 frames a second. There is recording limits, which I'll throw on the screen right now for all of these different things, but I do believe that Lumix is gonna, with a firmware update, remove these recording limits on this camera and make it just a little bit more usable for people that want to use this camera as a YouTube talking head camera. Now for the E10 Mark II, it is worth noting again, all the modes are in an APS-C crop mode already. Meanwhile, on the S9, only modes that are on crop are the 4K 48 frames or 60 frames a second in 4K. So the first thing worth knowing is there is no record limits on the Sony E10 Mark II. It does allow your camera the potential to overheat, but some tests that I've seen online seem like it wouldn't overheat for over an hour and 30 minutes, but that's also similar to some tests that people stop, hit record on the S9. So if Lumix removes the recording limits, this won't be an advantage in the future, but currently it is right now. Now it does have 4K 24 and 30 frames a second, again in APS-C, so it's not full frame. And then lastly, it has 4K 60 frames a second, but there is a 10% crop on top of the APS-C crop that the camera already has. And then the last setting that's worth mentioning is this camera can shoot 1080, 120 frames a second, but this is in 8-bit. Meanwhile, the Lumix S9 is in 10-bit 422. Now for stabilization, the S9 has 5-axis of body image stabilization, while the E10 Mark II has 0 IBIS whatsoever. Both these cameras do provide some type of an electronic stabilization, but it's hands down the S9 will be a clear winner because the S9 with their electronic stabilization and their different modes makes this camera almost like a gimbal. Meanwhile, the active stabilization on the Sony just feels like it's trying to keep up with Lumix, but it's really not a race. Lumix's stabilization is some of the best in the game currently. Now, one other thing that I do want to touch point on is the new Lumix Lab app, which does allow you to transfer your photos and videos onto your phone. You can also do something called auto transfer. So when you take a photo via Bluetooth, it's automatically transferring those photos over to your phone, which is really cool if you're in some type of event scenario or just in a real life scenario where you want to send those photos, airdrop them to your friends and family and be done. So it is really cool that there is this app that works with the Lumix S9. Now for my overall thoughts, full frame, being able to shoot in 6K, open gate, having all of this amazing IBIS, is that worth $500 more? I would say almost. If Lumix is able to remove the recording limits on the S9, I personally think it's a hands down win for the Lumix S9 with no record limits. Yes, there's a couple of nice little nifty features like the microphone on top of the Sony camera, the no record limits, but you take away the no record limits on the S9 and these cameras definitely are in a similar ballpark, but you're getting full frame, you're getting the best IBIS on the market, you're getting app integration of this camera. You can use this camera as a YouTube talking head as long as Lumix removes the recording limits. The moment they remove the recording limits, I think the S9 would be a hands down winner. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments below. And if you're interested in seeing why the Lumix S9 is my favorite camera right now, check out that video right there. And then YouTube recommends you might like this video right here. Till next one, guys, peace.